Welcome to the 3DownNation podcast. We start on a somber note. Saskatchewan Roughriders captain Jayden Dalkey was killed in a car accident on Saturday evening at the age of 30. The collision is believed to have occurred on Highway 11 between Regina and Lumsden around 9 p.m. local time. The Lumsden Fire Department responded to a two-vehicle collision and found one car in the center median and another in the southbound ditch. Two men were declared dead at the scene by emergency medical personnel. The Leduc, Alberta native recorded 69 defensive tackles, 31 special teams stops, 3 forced fumbles, 1 sack, and 1 interception, while also helping the Riders win the Grey Cup in 2025. He was previously a standout with the Edmonton Wildcats in the Canadian Junior Football League and played at the University of Alberta for the Golden Bears in U Sports football.
This is a tragedy, guys. I mean, it's unimaginable when two young people lose their lives in a situation like this. I think I speak for all of us at 3DownNation when I say, and frankly, all the CFL community, when I say we wish the best to Dalkey's family, his friends, his teammates, and we extend that, of course, to the family and friends of the other individual who was killed here.
R.I.P. Jayden Dalkey. Let's get to some football, fellas, because we have a lot to discuss, including Nathan Rourke suffering an injury to his non-throwing shoulder.
Tre Ford winning his first start with the Hamilton Tiger Cats.
The Edmonton Elks enjoying some improved attendance numbers.
Dru Brown not only beating, but coming back to get a win against his former team.
Dave Dickenson calling out CFL officials.
And the BC Lions adding a former NFL QB to their negotiation list. But first,
Hodge, 2 new rules factored into games in Week 7. The first came in Hamilton, where Liam Hairelahu missed a 31-yard field goal attempt on the final play in regulation, with his Argonauts trailing 24-23. Under the CFL's old rules, this would have resulted in a rouge and overtime, though the new rules resulted in no point in a Tiger Cats regulation victory. The second occurred in Ottawa, where the Blue Bombers and Redblacks played the first ever 2-point convert shootout after the game remained tied after 2 rounds of overtime. There ended up being 2 rounds of the convert shootout, with Winnipeg coming out on top 36-34. So, fellas, how do we feel about the rule changes after seeing them play out live in Week 7?
Well, it's funny to think that if this had all played out the exact same way, but just 1 year ago, we would have had overtime in the Battle of Ontario and a tie between the Bombers and Redblacks. And frankly, and I've been very critical of some of the changes the CFL is bringing in 2027, but I love both of these changes. Liam Hairelahu is a great kicker. He's a reigning all-CFL player, but this is a 31-yard field goal. You have to make that. I understand and appreciate he had a new holder this week, but looking at the replay of that particular play, it looked like a clean snap. It looked like a clean hold. And Hairelahu, after a brilliant 2025 season, is off to a poor start this year. He's in the 70s for field goal percentage. And he also missed a convert earlier in that fourth quarter. If he makes the convert or the field goal, at the very least, the Argonauts are going to overtime. And if he makes both, or even I guess just the field goal, they win this game. So I liked the change. I wouldn't have liked to see the Tiger Cats and Argonauts play in overtime after Hairelahu missed the field goal. It'll be interesting to see if maybe in the future, a kick like this, maybe the coaches say, hey, Liam, we want you to make the kick, but if you miss, could you have it land in the end zone? That way, at least we have a chance to get a rouge if the ball is fielded by the other returner. But I like this change. And I also like the change in Ottawa. Nobody likes ties. Ties are for weddings, funerals, and soccer. And football is none of those things. I want a winner. I want a loser for every game. And I saw the reviews on social media. They seem kind of mixed. And look, I don't think that the Redblacks or the Bombers, frankly, played very well in that game. The Redblacks could not put the Bombers away, and Winnipeg made a ton of mistakes and had a really, really slow start, especially offensively. So you can make the argument that neither team deserved to win, but I do not like the idea of leaving a football game with no winner. I prefer there to be a winner. And I thought if it all boils down to a shootout at the end, the team that does a better job in the shootout deserves to take it. And the Bombers went 2 for 2. The Redblacks went 1 for 2. So I was a fan of both of these changes. I think that maybe the communication from the officials in the latter game could have been a little better. I thought TSN maybe could have done a little better of a job explaining how the shootout would take place. But I like the new rule. And now that it's happened once, I don't think anyone's going to be caught off guard the next time it happens.
I'll start with the shootout because I was a big fan of that finish in Winnipeg, or in Ottawa against Winnipeg. I think it just cranks up the stakes at the end of an already exciting game in overtime. It has you on the edge of your seat. Every play matters. Every play is life and death. I know that there's some people who feel it's a little bit gimmicky, but I think it's the good type of gimmick, the type of gimmick that raises the excitement level rather than diminishes it at the end of the game with something like a tie. So I was a big fan of how it played out. I agree with you, Hodge, that there is some things that need to be ironed out in terms of the officials' handling of it. It was clear that they were figuring out the format on the fly. They weren't quite sure which team was going next in the shootout after the first round, different things like that. But that will be ironed out with time. This was a first crack at it, a historic moment. And I thought the results were exactly what the league was hoping for when they instituted this new rule. Now, on the flip side, with the single point no longer counting on the missed field goal, I've always been a defender of the Rouge. And quite frankly, I haven't lost any sleep over it being gone. But anytime you can have more football is better. And I think the fact that we no longer get overtime in those situations where, in my mind, Toronto had earned the right to push into extra time because of how they controlled that second half and the way that they marched down the field in that circumstance was disappointing. I thought it diminished the end of that football game, and I would have rather seen that missed field goal count for a point and have them duke it out in the extra frame. That's the type of football that I enjoy seeing. I know there's lots of people who don't like misses being rewarded. I think it's a reward for field position, not for missing a field goal, for being able to control the pace of the game and your positioning on the field. I'm disappointed it's gone, but again, won't be losing any sleep over it.
It's part of the evolution, I suppose, and I could go either way on what some people might call the loser point for missing a field goal there. I can understand both sides of it, but it's just part of life. Evolution's going to happen. You guys noted it. It was clear that the officials in the Ottawa game were trying to figure out the new 2-point shootout to get a winner, and I don't mind that. You have a decided winner in a football play type of way. It's not like we're going and doing a shootout, for example, like they do in the NHL or in soccer to decide a game. It's still a football play that decides the game. I saw some people talking online how they didn't like that a game would come down to that, but you're still playing football. So I think with player safety top of mind and the fact that you want to have a winner, I think that's better for all parties involved, that it seemed like after the officials got everything coordinated and figured out, because to be fair, it was the first time that it took place in CFL game, it went rather smoothly and we got a winner in an exciting game. Like that game comes down to not ultimately a potential game-winning field goal. It comes down to actually playing football. Like you have to play football on those plays in the 2-point conversion shootout to win the football game. So from that aspect, I like it. I do think there are some scheme analysis details that we could dive into there. Winnipeg appeared to be playing man. It looked like Ottawa was playing zone, gave up rather easy completions to Dru Brown in that 2-point conversion shootout, but that's potentially for another segment. I thought overall we got a winner. It was pretty good.
Really interesting tidbit from Dru Brown post-game is he indicated that I believe the first and also possibly the second 2-point convert they ran successfully was drawn up by Zach Collaros. So evidently, Zach Collaros anticipated the covers that the Redblacks would be in. And yeah, I was shaking my head going, why are we giving up the goal line for free on a 2-point convert? That doesn't make sense to me. But the question is about the format at hand. So I like the format. And for context, from 2015 to, or 2016, pardon me, to 2025, so a 10-year span, the CFL only had 4 games that weren't decided in double overtime and would have needed a shootout. So this is theoretically only going to come up about once every 2.5 seasons, which might be why everyone is a little underprepared for it, because this is the CFL where chaos reigns supreme. And if something's supposed to happen every 2.5 years, well, of course it happens in week 7, right after you change the rule. So we've now had it happen. We might not see it happen for a long time, but personally, I liked it. I'm glad for the change. And I'm really happy that as the season goes on, we don't have to deal with the quirkiness of, oh, right, 2 teams have a tie now, and that has thrown a massive wrench into the standings. I like the wins and losses. I like it clean. If a game is still tied by the point that a shootout is required, I'm cool with the shootout happening. And I think Justin makes a good point. These are still true football plays. This isn't one shooter against one goalie. Like, this is 12 on 12. It's still the game as it's meant to be played. So thumbs up for me.
Just to build on the point that you both raised in terms of Ottawa's calls at the goal line there in that 2-point shootout that allowed Winnipeg to score both times. Ryan Dinwiddie spoke after the game and indicated that it was match zone coverage called by the defense in that circumstance, and that he didn't disagree with the call type made, but that the defenders were playing far too deep in the end zone. So he placed the onus and the blame on the defensive backs in that circumstance. It's clear that Winnipeg saw that that was the plan and exploited it with the same call essentially twice.
BC Lions quarterback and reigning CFL MOP Nathan Rourke suffered an injury to his non-throwing shoulder early against the Edmonton Elks on Thursday night and watched most of the game from the sidelines in a sling. What did you make of Chase Bryce's performance in relief, and when could Rourke possibly make his return?
Well, details are still scarce about the nature of Rourke's injury. It is a left shoulder injury. My understanding is that they waited for the swelling to go down after the game, and then he was fully evaluated on Sunday. I do not yet know the results of that evaluation, but the general sense that I've gotten from the team is that it's not an overly serious injury. It's not going to be season ending. In fact, the timeline for return is likely in weeks, not in months, which is a very good sign for the BC Lions, though they are in a precarious position. Even if Rourke misses a few games, they don't have much wiggle room with their current record. And Chase Bryce, I thought, proved in that game that he's not good enough, right? I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I'll allow him a chance to rebound, but he did not look good coming off the bench through 4 interceptions. One of those was not his fault. You put the blame for that on the offensive line, but the other 3 I thought were terrible decisions on his part, and that there were other terrible decisions made throughout the football game. His accuracy was inconsistent. His timing was off, either too fast or too slow. And I understand that it's difficult to be thrust into a game like that, but he basically played the whole time. At some point, you've got to settle down and take control, with the exception of one touchdown drive where he evaded a sack to make a nice play and then threw another with his left hand. I thought that he generally played very poorly. We'll see what he looks like with a full week of practice. But the Lions are in trouble, even if this turns out to be a minor injury to Rourke, because they are 1-4 right now, and I'm not sure that they can win a game without him on the field. The length of time that he's on the sideline is going to do a lot to dictate their chances to make the playoffs in a very tough season to crack it in the West Division.
Let's save a more fuller assessment of Chase Bryce for after you alluded to, JC. He has a full week of practice with the starters reps, because we talked about it with Jake Dolegala. The Ticats elected to go with Tre Ford, which I felt like was the right decision, ultimately proved out that way. Thanks to Liram Hairulahu for the Ticats to get the win. But it's clear that you can look like a much different quarterback when you actually have some practice reps to get used to your receivers and then take that preparation into the game. So I thought actually, fellas, the more telling part of this football game was the fact that it was close. If you get 4 interceptions from the opposing quarterback and only win by 2, are the Elks actually as dominant as some people are making them out to be? I'm not taking away their glowing record to start the 2026 season. But when you get 4 interceptions and a backup quarterback is in the game and you only win by 2 and Justin Rankin only has 7 carries, it creates a lot of questions for me, even though Edmonton was able to win the football game.
Chase Brace, I put myself between you guys. Look, on the one hand, yeah, he didn't get the chance to start. He's not getting a lot of reps in practice, but yet he had to play almost the whole game. And also, Edmonton does have the top-ranked defense in the CFL. They're very good on a yards per play basis. They're the number 1 team in terms of takeaways, and that was true even before this game when they got another 5. So they're now way ahead of everybody else, but they were already number 1. So it's not an easy test. If I'm a CFL quarterback having to pick up the slack for someone who's gotten hurt and essentially start without actually playing the first series or 2, I would not pick the Edmonton Elks. Okay, so that's one hand. On the other hand, this is also a 28-year-old player who's in year 4, right? This isn't a 23-year-old who's bright-eyed and bushy-tailed who maybe came up late in 2025 but has not seen a lot of CFL action, is still learning the game. Like, this is somebody who's been in that room in BC for a long time. He's had a couple of different coaching staffs to learn from, and he didn't really look ready to be a primary backup. And we criticized this team last year when Jeremiah Masoli made a couple of starts, struggled, going, man, if this is the best Jeremiah Masoli can be at his relatively old age, why not let Chase Brace rip it and just see what you got? And the Lions didn't do that. I think it'd be fair to speculate. Maybe they were worried he wouldn't look good. Well, he didn't look good. Now, I also think he does deserve the chance to start this week, assuming, of course, Nathan Rourke does not play. I don't think we should make any assumptions ever, but based on a week-to-week, not month-to-month basis of recovery, which JC's outlining, yeah, I think it's probably fair to speculate that Nathan Rourke won't play. And if and when he does not, I'm curious to see what Chase Brace does. But to me, it's not a long leash. This is your team for the foreseeable future as Rourke recovers. This should be a 1-week opportunity, at which point this team can go to Caden Salter, their third stringer, who, by the way, has a ton of athleticism, very, very different style of player than Chase Brace, or even start looking at other options. And as an aside, fellas, I think JC illustrated well. This is bad for the BC Lions, but this is bad for the Canadian Football League. Like, the first 5 weeks of this season, unbelievable. And the last couple, especially since Levi Mitchell's gone down, since Nathan Rourke's gone down, the games have not been as compelling. So let's keep our fingers and toes crossed that we do not have any other quarterback injuries for the foreseeable future. We get Nathan Rourke back. Unlikely that Levi Mitchell comes back this year, but who knows? Maybe it's not impossible. The Ticats haven't written him off for the year. Let's hope our quarterbacks stay healthy, because we don't want this trend to continue.
I'm glad you brought that up, Hodge. And I think for the Lions franchise, as much as the team on the field, this is a very concerning development, because you've been on the road for the first third of the season because of the FIFA World Cup, and you're set to make your return to BC plays this week. All right, we know how attendance has gone up in Vancouver under the ownership of Amar Doman, how he's been able to pull out all the stops. Well, he's already spent his money on those 2 games in Kelowna, so there's no kickoff concert at BC Place this year. There's now a team that is 1-4 coming into that building who has generated no buzz around the city as a result, and has been out of the public imagination for the entirety of the season at this point because of what's been going on here with FIFA. And now the number 1 most marketable player in the Canadian Football League and your star player, your star quarterback, is likely not going to be on the field. Like, that's not a recipe for a roaring crowd. And I'm a little bit concerned to see what will happen at BC Place to welcome the Lions home because of that confluence of circumstances. You could not have designed a worse set of circumstances to come back to if you were the Lions. So we'll see what results when they do kick off this weekend, but it's certainly a devastating blow to the organization's chances of winning on the field and also potentially their bottom line at the box office. Canadian quarterback Tre Ford made his first start as a member of the Hamilton Tiger Cats and fared relatively well, completing 21 of 27 pass attempts for 218 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception, with 10 carries for 109 yards on the ground. What did you make of Ford's performance? And do you think he can continue leading the Tiger Cats to wins over the coming weeks?
I thought he looked really comfortable, and it seemed like Scott Milanovic built a game plan to suit Tre Ford. He throws for over 200 yards, rushes for over 100 in the game, and even though he hasn't been in Milanovic's scheme very long, I thought Milanovic did a great job of making it look that way, and I think that's what a full week of reps as the starting quarterback can do, but Ford didn't
But
even have that
he didn't have a full
due
week of
to
rest.
exactly. That's what I was just about to say. The
Yeah, I was
wildfire
cutting you
smoke
off.
that was going on in Ontario. So Ford looked good. On to you, Hodge.
I mean, Ford is now 11-13 as a CFL starter. It's not a great record, but Tre Ford's also played on a lot of bad teams over the course of his half-decade-long career, dating back mostly to his time with the Edmonton Elks. I thought he looked like a solid version of Tre Ford, right? Tre Ford is not going to go in there and run the exact same offense that Bo Levi Mitchell did. He plays the game in a completely different way. And I think if you try to shoehorn Tre Ford into exactly that, you're setting everybody up for failure. I think that's likely why. And Scott Milanovic talked publicly about this to an extent. They initially went with Jake Dolegala. Okay, we don't have to change our offense if Jake Dolegala can go out there and run it effectively. And after one outing, they evidently decided that wasn't worth it. And so they decided to change things and roll with Tre. Now, just like Chase Bryce was playing the best defense in the CFL, it should be noted the Toronto Argonauts have the worst defense in the Canadian Football League on a yard per play basis. Their pass rush is not stellar. And I think there are times where they lost contain on Tre, allowed him to run at will. And there are other defenses that are not going to let that happen. But you put up 24 points in the Canadian Football League. It's not a great number, but it's not a bad number. You can win games scoring 24 points. And in this case, thanks to a couple of bad misses from Liam Hairolahu, the Ticats did come away with a win. And if you're a fan in Steel Town, I think you're exhaling a little bit going, okay, the season obviously was derailed when Bo Levi Mitchell went down, but maybe it's not over, right? We can go from a team that can compete for number 1 in the East Division. I don't think that's possible without Bo, but we can still really compete for a home playoff game if this is the formula, right? We're going to play tough defense, and I thought the Ticats did a great job defensively, shutting down a very high-powered Toronto Argonauts attack for stretches of that game, getting a pick. But all in all, I would give Ford a B minus. It was a good performance. It wasn't a bad performance. It wasn't an amazing performance, but I thought he did the type of things well that he typically does. And when he's at his best, being himself and improvising and buying time with his legs and making defenders miss in the open field, he's obviously fun to watch. And he got his club the win.
Sorry for cutting you off there, Dunk, but I think it was an important statement to make with excitement because Tre Ford didn't have that full week of practice because of the wildfires. It was just walkthroughs, and he looked as good as he did on the field. And I think credit goes to Ford for that. But to your point, credit goes to Scott Milanovic because this is as good a football game as I've seen called on behalf of Tre Ford as I've seen during his time in the CFL. Time and time again, we've complained about various different offensive coordinators and head coaches not allowing him to be Tre, right? To try and put him into a box and limit him inside a scheme. And I think there was a genuine fear with Scott Milanovic, who is very particular about his quarterbacks, that would also be the case here. And those fears were legitimized when he didn't go with Tre Ford in the aftermath of Bo Levi Mitchell's injury. But whatever happened during that week of being unable to practice, I think has changed the course of what that relationship looks like, because it's clear that Milanovic took some advice in the off seasons from conversations with people like Cliff Kingsbury about athletic quarterbacks, and he allowed Tre to be his full potential, right? It was quick passes. It was a game that suited him well in the air, and then he allowed him to use his legs as a primary weapon. Now, was that simply a byproduct of not being able to practice and him leaning on the most simple, basic elements? Potentially. Maybe he tries in future weeks to mold Ford more into his traditional system, and it doesn't work as well. That's entirely possible. But right now, the early returns show a coach that has molded his playbook for a player, and that should always be applauded. I thought it was a great performance from the man calling the plays and the one executing them.
The Edmonton Elks posted official attendance numbers of just over 20,000 for their win over the BC Lions in Week 7. This marked the first time the team has reached that threshold in a game not involving the Calgary Stampeders, Saskatchewan Roughriders, or Winnipeg Blue Bombers since 2023. Is this a sign the team is officially on the upswing?
I do. And I mean, I don't think having attendance of just over 20,000 means that the problem is fixed. And I don't think that this is a situation where we should overreact, but I do think it's a genuinely positive step in the right direction. The Elks have had good attendance numbers over the last few years when certain teams have come to town. Obviously, the Battle of Alberta always draws a nice crowd, people coming up from Calgary. And then when Winnipeg or Saskatchewan is in town, there's a lot of displaced Manitobans and Saskatchewanians who are in Alberta full time and show up wearing their blue and gold or they're green and white, and that of course boosts attendance. Where the Elks have had really, really poor attendance numbers in the last few years are when those clubs are not coming to town. And all due respect to the BC Lions, but I didn't see a lot of orange in that crowd. That seemed like a crowd of around 20,000 people who were cheering for the home side, and they made a lot of noise towards the end of that game when things were on the line and the Lions were trying to drive the field for a potential game-winning score that did not materialize. Now, for reference, through 3 games, the Elks had just over 16,000 in attendance officially last year. This year, they're just shy of 17,000. So it's only an increase of about 800. It's about 4%. But what I think is really encouraging is that from week 6 to week 7, official attendance grew from just under 16,000 to just over 20,000. So on a year-to-year basis, there hasn't been a crazy jump, but I think if you're looking for a reason for that jump from week 6 to week 7, it's just more people going, okay, this team is still winning games. They're playing an exciting brand of football. Justin Rankin killing everybody. Now, we know that didn't happen in week 7. He was shut down by the Lions, but the Elks still got a win. They're 5-1, which is a great record no matter how you slice it. And I do think that this is the start of a positive trend. Now, the Elks are not going to get back to 30,000, 35,000, 40,000 anytime soon. And that would not be a realistic expectation. This team bottomed out in a terrible way. And there were games last year where the official attendance was in the teens, but it was pretty clear looking on television that there was at most 10,000 people in the building. So the fact that their official numbers are back to 20, and who knows, maybe by the end of the year, they start hitting, 25. And I mean, they'll get more than that again when certain teams come to town. But for late season games against East Division opponents, can they stay above 20? Can they get to 25? To me, that's the goal. And then above that, we're talking 30, 35,000, 40. We can talk about that years down the line. This team is not going to fix the problem in 1 year. It didn't happen in 1 year, so it's going to take more than a year to fix. But it does seem like the worst has happened in Edmonton, and they are officially in year 1 of climbing out of this deep, deep hole.
Yeah, it was a very positive sign in my book. And when you've got the president of the team telling you, Hodge, that 20,000 as an average attendance will get them close to profitability, and you finally cross that threshold for a game, that has to put a smile on your face for everyone in the Canadian Football League, because as much as we have rivalries and we're being unbiased as reporters, and whether you're a fan or someone covering the league, it's always positive when all the teams are on good financial footing. And that has not been the case in Edmonton for the last number of years. This could be a point that we point to in a few years if things do eventually turn around and say, this is when it began to change. And it should, because the football team on the field is dramatically improved. And I know, Dunk, you pointed out earlier in the show that, maybe there was some flaws in that performance against BC. And I think that's very fair. They should have dominated that game and they didn't. Offensively, they struggled, but they can win in multiple ways, right? They've built a strong enough defense where they can make those plays and pick up the offense when it struggles. And they've got a ground game that can win on its own when they need to, when Cody Fajardo isn't throwing the ball well enough. And they don't typically turn the ball over on offense very much. Like, there is a blueprint here for the Edmonton Elks in the year 2026 to not just be a playoff football team, but I think legitimately to be a Grey Cup contender. And I think they're following almost identically the blueprint of the last Grey Cup team with Cody Fajardo at the helm, the 2023 Montreal Alouettes, in the sense that they don't put it all on their QB, and they've got a dominant defense that can bail them out when needed. I'm very high on this football team, and I'm glad to see people in my birth city finally getting back behind them.
The Elks at 5-1 have looked really good, and I think that having some stars to sell there in what used to be known as the City of Champions helps get some of the butts in seats, but ultimately it's going to be wins. It can help refurbish your brand, if you will, and I think it's done that with Edmonton. So full credit to Chris Morris, Ed Hervey, Mark Killam for the 5-1 start and putting a new paint of coat, if you will, on the Double E brand and getting more fans in the seats there at Commonwealth Stadium, hopefully for their benefit and really the league overall, as you both touched on. That number continues to grow because we have seen large crowds in Edmonton in the not too distant past, but you got to go back a little ways to find it. And I'll say this is what happens when you bring in people who know what the franchise is about and you don't have an American president and Chris Preston there coming in and just blowing things up with stick of dynamite after stick of dynamite after stick of dynamite. This has been a smart hire to put these people in place. And yes, it's worked out on the football field, but I think Chris Morris, with his ties to the community, and even though he admitted he was going to have to learn in that president's role, he has done a great job in bringing those community ties over that he developed with the University of Alberta, similar colors there with the Golden Bears, to the Double E, where he played as a former player. I think that has really seemingly helped the vibe of the team around the city. Winning helps. It is definitely key to the turnaround, but I think those connections in the community will have the chance at least for this to become sustainable for Edmonton. And then the stars that I talked about, you have a guy in Cody Fajardo who's won a Grey Cup, been a Grey Cup MVP before. You have Justin Rankin legitimately pushing to make CFL history. 1,000 rushing, 1,000 receiving yards is still attainable for him. You have a guy like Austin Mack who can make head-top catches, might not be as consistent as you want from a number one, but from a highlight reel perspective, he's a guy that can put butts in seats in live action, and that defense is getting better and better. You got Malik Carney coming off the edge. Joel DeBlanco is an absolute force for Edmonton. He consistently brings the physicality for them. And then I would say a secondary that's clearly building together, led by Tre Ford, the Canadian, who has been outstanding in his career in the CFL.
JC, we'll get you out on this one. Calgary Stampeders head coach and GM Dave Dickenson ripped CFL officials after his team's loss to the Montreal Alouettes on Saturday. Benny Sapp III was penalized 15 yards for unnecessary roughness when he clocked Travis Tice at the sideline, though Dickenson argued it's not against the rules to hit a running back in the head with a shoulder while they're in bounds. What did you make of Dickinson's argument?
I thought it was a terrible argument. by Dave Dickenson because it is, in fact, illegal to deliver a blow to the head or neck of an opponent without any mitigating circumstances. That's under Article 4, subsection G of the CFL rulebook. And I quote, "It is an unnecessary roughness penalty to be delivering a blow to an opponent in the neck or head." There is nothing else stated about whether it's with the crown of the helmet, the forearm, the shoulder, whatever it is. The only factor is mitigating circumstances, i.e., a guy running low behind his pads where the helmet is at a different level. To me, this was a blatant foul. I'm not sure what Dickinson's upset about. If you didn't call it for the hit on the head, I think it would be unnecessary roughness because Travis Tice was clearly going out of bounds at the time when he was being hit. He wasn't out of bounds yet, but half his body was already over the stripe. It just hadn't touched at the time that the contact was made. So I thought it was a good flag by the officials. And it should be noted, as we sat here recording this podcast, the Calgary Stampeders have released Benny Sapp III. I'm not sure if that's related to this call or not, but he is no longer a member of the team.
I can understand, if I can speak English today, Dave Dickinson's viewpoint. You're competitive, you're in the game, you don't want the call to go against your team. But I think how JC explained it is well taken and how probably the majority of people see it. But the competitive aspect, you don't want to see that flag. So I get taking it to the next level. You don't want to have that call go against you again. But in this, I'll call it evolving era of professional tackle football, these types of plays are going to be flagged, especially if it appears as though the ball carrier, in this instance, Travis Tice, is going out of bounds.
Yeah, and to me, and not to blame the victim here, because I don't think Travis Tice did anything wrong necessarily, but there was a Stampeders defender kind of near the sideline, and it looks like Tice, and I'm just basing this speculation off of what I saw in the play. It looked like he passed the defender, realized he was going to head out of bounds, and started to slow down before hitting the sideline. And maybe it would have been better if he just kept his head up, because I don't think he was able to see Benny Sapp coming. And until you're out of bounds, you should keep your head up just so you can protect yourself if there is another defender. Now, I don't think Benny Sapp had to come in running 1,800 kilometers an hour and lay in the wood like he did. But I also understand it from a defensive perspective. When you hear defensive players say sometimes like, hey, if this guy by some miracle stays in bounds and I have the chance to knock him out and I don't, my coach is going to rip me. We saw that a few weeks ago when Noah Getman, a punter who doesn't even make tackles for a living, got ripped by his head coach for not pushing a returner out of bounds. So I kind of get that side of it. I wish that we heard from Benny Sapp about the hit. But yeah, I don't agree with Dave Dickinson's take. The rule book is the rule book. We had this conversation last week, and the rule book says that you cannot do that. So I'm not sure exactly what Dave Dickinson meant here. Unfortunately, the CFL does not announce when coaches are fined or given supplemental discipline, because I'd imagine that Dave Dickinson will be fined for publicly criticizing officials. That said, I do appreciate him doing it, right? We've all been in press conferences where coaches want to say something and they're biting their tongue because they don't want to pay a subsequent fine or deal with supplemental discipline. So as much as I don't agree with what he said, I do appreciate him speaking honestly, because in the media, that's what we hope for, right? We want honesty, we want candidness. And again, though he may not have been correct, Dave Dickinson certainly provided us with that, and we appreciate it.
Dru Brown helped the Winnipeg Blue Bombers defeat his old team, the Ottawa Redblacks, on Sunday night in his first trip back to the nation's capital. What did you make of his performance, and where do the two teams go from here? Ottawa, especially, being 0-6.
Woof. We'll get to the Redblacks in a second. Dru Brown first. I thought he played fine. His stat line was really good, over 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. And if you didn't watch the game and you just looked at the box score, you'd think, wow, this guy lit it up in his return to Ottawa. That, I would say, is misleading, and that's why no stat ever, by the way, should be taken out of context. Every stat has a backstory, and this one does too. Dru Brown in the second half had 4 separate plays, arguably 5 if you include the Demario Houston would-be interception that could and arguably should have been picked off by Ottawa Redblacks defenders. Shakur Brown, who started for Ottawa at boundary corner, dropped one in the third, dropped one in the fourth, and dropped one in overtime. 2 of them would likely have sealed the game, and there was also one from Deontay Ruffin, who started at boundary halfback. He dropped a would-be interception in the end zone in overtime that would have won the game for the Redblacks. So, I mean, there are some times where quarterbacks have really bad luck, where over 3 games they'll throw 2 balls that can be intercepted. They both get picked off. There's times they get really lucky where they throw 10 balls that could have been picked off and 0 get intercepted. So interceptions could be a misleading stat, and I think that was in this case. That said, I think Dru Brown also did some good things. I liked how he used his legs in the first half when Stanley Bryant was really struggling at left tackle against Luigi Villain, the local product in Ottawa, who's up now at the Redblacks after 4 years in the NFL. I also thought he did a really nice job finding Tim White, Nick Dembski, Ontario Wilson in those intermediate routes where the Bombers, whether it's Zach Collaros under center or Brown, have made a lot of hay this year. And I like that he pushed the ball deep a little bit. We didn't see that really at all in his first start against the Argonauts. Well, he looked to Wilson down the sideline early on, and it honestly should have been a 42-yard catch from Wilson. He just looked like he didn't track the ball quite well. He was hand fighting with the defender, and he just couldn't bring it in. But it did hit him in the hands. So to me, if you're going to count the dropped interceptions, I think you also have to give Brown credit for a couple of balls as receiver. Should have had Tommy Neild also missed one over the middle, 27 yards, hit him in the hands, should have caught it. So in all, I'd give Dru Brown a C, maybe. Like he played fine. I don't think he played as well as he could, but I also don't think it was a bad performance. I do think Jake Maier was the better of the 2 quarterbacks, despite not having as good of a stat line. He had 1 touchdown, 1 pick for the Redblacks. But in terms of where do the Redblacks go from here, I mean, this team is going into a bye. They're 0-6. They're 4 points out of 3rd place in the East. They're 6 points out of 2nd place in the East. And this schedule, Justin, is murder. They are playing the Montreal Alouettes, who have been killing everybody, when they come back from bye week. They then have to go to Saskatchewan, go to Winnipeg, and then go to Montreal. Like, this team could realistically be 0-10. And as much as nothing is for certain in the Canadian Football League, I don't want to rule anybody out. But it seems like a foregone conclusion. Dare I say a 99% chance plus that this team will miss the playoffs this year. They are in a deep hole. I think the Toronto Argonauts, they have to figure things out defensively, but I think they're better than their 2-4 record shows. They've already lost head-to-head, by the way, to Toronto. And the Ticats at 3-3, I just think they have too much of a lead for the Redblacks to catch them. And obviously, the Redblacks are not catching the Montreal Alouettes. Like, that's not in the cards. So I have a really, really tough time seeing the Redblacks make any headway in the standings. And for the sake of their fans, that sucks, because this team has been in the proverbial toilet now since basically 2019. And there's a reason that TD Place Stadium is only attracting 14,000 fans per game. And that's because everyone else is fed up. And I understand why.
According to CFL Associate Vice President, Football Analytics, Steve Daniel, there's only one team that has made the playoffs, Grey Cup playoffs, I should add, after starting the season 0-6. That was the BC Lions in 1969. So Hodge is pretty accurate there when he says 99% chance. It's the Redblacks up against it if they're going to make it the playoffs. If you look at it, the Redblacks would likely have to play 7-5 ball the rest of the way to go 7-11 and have a chance. If they finish better than that, that would obviously increase their opportunity. But based on the 0-6 start, it would be hard to see them even have a 7-5 record going the rest of the season to get to 7-11, which has made the playoffs in the East Division in the past. But as we noted on the show last week, you probably have to be better than just a third place team in the East Division to get into the playoffs in 2026 because of how good the West Division has been, at least to start the year in the CFL in 2026. So The Redblacks have been in some ball games, have not helped themselves. There are some Redblacks fans out there questioning whether or not Bryson Barnes was in the end zone. Seems like there could be some clear evidence. That didn't seem like it was so clear to the replay center. And then there were the dropped interceptions that Hodge alluded to, made Dru Brown's stat line look better, but could have easily, Deontay Ruffin, I'm looking at you, ended the football game in overtime, or perhaps even earlier when you talk about some of the other drops from Shakir Brown and DeMario Houston, who dropped what looked like it was going to be a pick six in the football game as well. So credit the Bombers for winning the game, but I don't think it was Dru Brown leading them to that win because of so many of these off-target throws that simply were not caught by Ottawa. But ultimately, to win the game, you got to catch those footballs or you got to finish it off. Ottawa has not been able to do that, and that's why they are a CFL worst 0-6.
Yeah, and we'll see with the bye week if there's any changes in Ottawa, but let's remember, with the CFL operations cap, it doesn't really matter if you want to make changes or not. Making changes, like wholesale changes, is not really possible. You can sometimes make one, right? We saw in BC, for instance, they replaced their special teams coordinator, but like if you're a Redblacks fan sitting there going, I want everybody fired, well, that's literally impossible. And we can sit and argue about whether the operations cap is a good or a bad thing. I think it's generally a bad thing, personally, but it doesn't change the fact that it's in place and evidently not going anywhere anytime soon. So if you're a Redblacks fan, I appreciate it if you had a patience. Just know better times are ahead. They always are. This has been a really rough stretch, but this team will eventually be good again, I think. It's now time for Hodge's Heritage Moment. On this day in 2006, 20 years ago today, Milt Stegall caught a 100-yard pass from Kevin Glenn as time expired to defeat the Edmonton football team at Commonwealth Stadium by a score of 25-22. Two defenders collided as Stegall caught the pass from Kevin Glenn, leaving a clear pass to the end zone. Ricky Ray had thrown a 9-yard touchdown pass to Jason Tucker just moments earlier, all but sealing the victory. The clip of the touchdown was shown as part of the league's No Lead is Safe campaign, promoting the unpredictable nature of the CFL, one of their best ad campaigns I've ever seen. And I always love this story. I remember waking up the next morning in Winnipeg, and I don't have a copy of it. I can't find it anywhere, but I would love, love, love to find it somewhere. And this, I swear to God, I'm telling this the right way. I'm pretty sure my memory is serving me correctly. The Winnipeg Free Press, the early edition that had been printed and delivered to my parents' home, my childhood home, had a story on the front cover about how the Bombers had lost at Edmonton. And Milt Stegall, who at the time was chasing the all-time touchdowns record, had failed to reach the end zone. And of course, there was later a re-edition saying, none of that happened. Milt scored and the Bombers won. But a thing that doesn't really happen anymore, right? We now get our news. We expect it up to the second. This was an hours and I guess day late coming from a West game to Winnipeg. But man, I wish I'd kept a copy of that paper saying the Bombers lost this game and Milt didn't score. That would have been an amazing little sports souvenir.
If somebody out there has a copy, screenshot it or take a photo, I should say, and send it to our 3DownNation email account. Hodge would probably want to see it.
Yes. And if you live locally in Winnipeg and you're willing to part with it, I'll pay you. I'll buy it from you. Just let me know when and where. I'll meet you at a Tim Hortons or something. I want a copy of this newspaper. I'm not a very sentimental, like souvenir kind of guy, but I want a copy of this paper. If somebody has it, let us know.
It's a unique piece of memorabilia at this point, Hodge. I like it. Let's get to the 3-minute drill. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers moved franchise quarterback Zach Collaros to the 6-game injured list. Does that mean he's going to be out for that exact period of time?
Head coach Mike O'Shea indicated that Collaros will not be out for a full 6 games, so I don't think so. That said, the team is on a short week. They're practicing once this week. It's a closed practice, and they're not making quarterbacks available to the media. So it's going to be a while before we get a comprehensive update on Collaros' status. We reported at 3DownNation that only 4 teams in CFL history have ever made the playoffs after starting 0-5. You already talked about it a bit, Dunk, but with the Redblacks now at 0-6, I said there's a 99+% chance they're missing the playoffs. Would you agree?
I'll say 99.9.
Damn.
Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston recently met with the business group behind their private stadium proposal. Does that mean we're going to see the Schooners or another team in Atlantic Canada hit the field anytime soon?
Look, if there's a private equity group with a ton of money who's wanting to spend it in my community, I would meet with them pretty much no matter what. And that is the responsibility of a premier. Do I think this changes a lot or makes it close? No, but it's interesting to see that at least these preliminary steps are taking place. I'm curious to see if anything comes of them. The Hamilton Tiger Cats officially signed Harrison Frost after his season in the UFL. Could he start games for them down the road?
I suppose it's possible, but I think ideally, if you're a Tiger Cats fan out there and for the Tiger Cats team themselves, it's Tre Ford for the foreseeable future if he can keep his play up to the level that he showed against Toronto. The BC Lions added former NFL quarterback Logan Woodside to their negotiation list. Could we see him in black and orange anytime soon?
I mean, he's 31 and he's got, I think it's 7 years of NFL under his belt. Didn't play all those years, but was under contract with different teams, attending OTAs and training camps, that type of thing. Look, the Lions need another quarterback, assuming Rourke is going to miss time. So it could be Woodside, but if not, I'm curious to see who else they bring in. Max Duggan is a guy I've talked about a few times on this show. TCU standout is available. They need somebody because you need a third quarterback on that active roster. The CFL issued a maximum fine to Micah Awe for his high hit on Vernon Adams Jr. in week 6. Was that the right decision?
Yes, you have to protect quarterbacks, and he has a history of these on his resume, so it was the right decision. The Toronto Argonauts released veteran defensive lineman American Dwayne Hendricks this past week. Why did they make the move?
Well, I think they like what they have in Ralph Hawley, the newcomer Toya, the global they start at nose tackle. It's a deep group on that interior. For me, the concern in Toronto is they're not getting pressure off the edge. So we'll see if they make an addition there. Vernon Adams Jr. now has 17 touchdown passes and 0 interceptions on the season. Justin, what's your prediction? How many touchdowns will he have before he throws his first?
That's hard to throw out a number, but this is impressive from Vernon Adams Jr. And we've talked about Vernon Adams Jr. on the show for a long time now in his CFL career, Hodge. And we've talked about him being up and down or how he turns the football over too much. Well, Vernon Adams Jr. is telling everybody who's ever said that at this point to take them apples and eat them all up and stuff them, I should say, because 17 touchdowns to 0 interceptions, that's incredible. Unbelievable from Vernon Adams Jr. I would imagine at some point throughout the season, there's going to be a tipped pass or one that's off target that gets intercepted that comes off the hands of Vernon Adams Jr. Not to say there hasn't been some interceptable balls thrown by him up to this point, but that's an incredible statistic. And you would think if your quarterback had that touchdown to interception ratio, the Calgary would have more wins on the board. So I don't know what that says about the rest of the team, but Vernon Adams Jr. has been spectacular at protecting the football.
Well, and it speaks to the play of Justin Rankin, Tyson Philpott, Davis Alexander, etc. That VA has 17 to nothing touchdown interception ratio, and nobody is talking about him as MOP. I think part of that is that the Stamps are 2-4, but still, he is not the reason they are 2-4. They got to figure things out defensively, but regardless, hell of a start for VA. Kudos to him. And I'm excited to see what he does in person in Winnipeg in week 8. JC and I will be back for our picks on Wednesday for all 4 games. And then we'll, of course, chop up week 8 with Justin Dunk next Monday. While you're at 3DownNation.com, don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. We've also got a brand new Betting Insights newsletter you can sign up for. They are both free, and you can cancel either at any time, though I'm not sure why you'd want to. So make sure to do that and stay safe out there, folks.